Former Phoenix Suns head coach Monty Williams headed, maybe, to the Detroit Pistons, being chased, being pursued. On today's episode of Locked On Suns, how will Suns fans look back on the Monty Williams era? We have had a little bit of time. Is Detroit a good fit? Is there any way Suns fans ever forgive the man who they think stole a championship and more from them? Let's go.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we're back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Brendan Clean, a credentialed media member covering the Suns for the past 6 seasons, a writer at Suns.com, and the host of the Just Basketball Show wherever you get your podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Suns your first listen here on this Thursday. We're free and available everywhere, so wherever you are finding us, all you got to do to get us in your feed every single Monday through Friday is hit follow or subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, including YouTube. Become an everydayer, get locked onto your favorite team. All the news, analysis, and more, interviews, everything that you could possibly need as a Suns fan each and every day. Aaron Edwards is joining as he does every single week to talk about Monty Williams, somebody who has only been out of our lives for 2.5 weeks, but he is back in the news. Apparently, allegedly, reportedly, being pursued by the Detroit Pistons, the team that I think was most likely to get him all along, and it felt like Monty was going to take the year off. Now they're offering him as much as $10 million. Aaron, that might be more than the Suns end up paying their next coach. I don't know if you thought about it that way, but this man might actually get a raise out of this whole thing.
Yeah, and it's not like all the way undeserved, I guess, for what they're asking him to do. So, yeah, like I think it's fine on both sides. I think we're going to go to potentially a coach that got fired regardless, or that's been fired before, or somebody's first time head coaching. So I think it would make sense to probably end up being our next coach being cheaper than what Monty's going to get. At the end of the day, he did turn around a laughingstock. And I think that's what that's what Detroit wants him to do. And I think as far as that goes, like just bringing a terrible team to prominence, and not even like a terrible team. Like they got some good parts over there. Mm-hmm. I think asking him to do that is kind of worth the money. I think he can do that part. It's the next part after that. Once you built him up I just don't think he's made for.
Yeah, putting myself in the shoes of somebody like Monty Williams and any number of these guys that are like retreads, kind of searching for their next shot. Mike Brown last year, similar with the Kings. I've been like advocating for, and I stand by it. Like I think a team in the Suns' position, a lot of the time, their best chance is to try something new, is to try something different, because most of the other options are going to be, like you just said, guys who have already gotten fired. And so why do that unless you think some aspect of a retread coach is going to be really good for what you need to do? You should try something that hasn't been done before. And I stand by all of that. But putting myself in Monty's shoes or Mike Brown's shoes, or even Dwayne Casey, who Monty might replace, who ended up in a similar position when he came to Detroit a few years back, how is it that we're in a situation where great teams want first-timers and bad teams want proven guys as their head coach? Like that, the other, like if you flip it, that's the part that starts to make no sense to me, is like, hold on. It's a good landing spot for the guy who was in the finals 2 years ago to go coach a bad team, and yet like Jordi Fernandez is somehow a good fit here. Like that is a little backwards.
I think in a way it's kind of like the first time the league has sort of gone toward the NFL thing. Like everybody's white boy with a fade that knows offense now. Like that's pretty much all the NFL is. It's just dudes that know offense. It's like young offensive coordinators getting jobs. And I think like foundationally, like you can use like the dudes with experience and the coaches to like build like just your foundation to like start winning games and maybe make the playoffs and stuff like that. But to like get over the hump, I wouldn't say it's like every time, but sometimes you just need a younger mind to like kind of see what the old guys kind of can't see or they refuse to see. So I can see like to get over the hump with really good teams going that route. But with bad teams, you kind of want what like you're paying for, and you kind of just want like exactly what you know you're going to get when you like have a terrible team like that.
It is similar to the NFL. I hadn't really thought about it that way, but I mean that type of pattern does play out over there too. And I think the other part of it in the NFL is, the best coaches or the most stable coaching situations are guys that aren't going to move. And so it's like, unless you luck into one of those who you just keep for the next 2 decades, whether it's Andy Reid or Mike Tomlin or Bill Belichick or whatever, the teams that never have to think about coach, most of the time you're cycling through. And I think the league kind of over there figured out like, well, if we fire our coach way too often anyway, we might as well at least be trying something new every time rather than just getting like the guy that got fired from over there. We'll take him, and then next offseason we'll do the same thing. It feels like that is one thing. I don't really know. I've never seen the numbers behind it, but enough people are saying it that I guess I'll just believe it, that is happening more in the NBA, is just it being blamed on the coach. But to me, it's a little bit of like the super team. It's kind of a byproduct of that era that we're in, where you give up everything to go out and get star players, and then it's like, well, maybe at some point we'll see like, okay, the Gobert trade happens, and then eventually maybe Minnesota has to pivot and trade Cat as a way to rebuild up around whatever their next version of their team is going to be. But in the meantime, well, I'd be probably a little nervous if I'm Chris Finch, right? Or in this case of the Suns, it's like, yeah, maybe there's a version where Book asks out or KD doesn't want to be here on his next contract, and they start to have cap space again or make a big trade 3 years from now. But right now, the best way to do anything is to go ahead and trade your to switch out your coach, to fire your coach and find somebody new. So I think that's part of why we're here too. But what do you think? I mean, we're only, like I said, about 3 weeks removed from Monty being fired, but I think that, if they can succeed with the next guy and Monty can go on to another situation, whether it's Detroit or he gets another job next season, next summer, I think people will eventually like come back to appreciate what he did. I think there's a lot of negativity on it right now, but like you said, this was a complete joke. Like, it was a godsend when that man decided to come here. And like, maybe half the Suns fans who have jumped on the bandwagon since weren't even, adults when that all went down. But like, he chose the Suns over the Lakers, and he made us respectable again out of nowhere here in Phoenix. Like, that matters.
Yeah, I think that's where like, and he did have his fault, and we burned him a lot on here for it. But at the end of the day, like, even when he got fired, like, it was like he switched us from being just a laughingstock, like awful, him, James Jones, like, and they still had to deal with Sarver, like all of that stuff. Like, they were dealing with Sarver like day to day still, and he still was able to build like a respectable team. And I think that we have to really be happy about that part, and while at the same time knowing like where he got us was where he was going to get us. Like, that was the end of it. That's what it was going to be. And if we wanted to run it back, we would have been saying the same thing next year, like in the second round, with just like the decisions he made. Like, he was always going to make the same decisions. Like, how many times are we going to have to see him play 9 dudes that are barely NBA players? Like, I just think if we were going to do that, we might as well do it with a younger guy and see what he's got.
The other part, and it goes back to this, running through coaches more consistently thing, and we'll get to a mailbag here in the second and third segments with all of your guys' questions, but just generally speaking, like, how much do you feel like, whether it's a coach or, now people are talking about Bob Myers, whether it's in, Phoenix or any number of teams would obviously like to have a guy like that. I even think of Philadelphia with Nick Nurse, and people seem to be sort of mixed on that one. I think there's some people who feel like he's going to be a little more creative. He might be able to get through to Embiid, considering he schemed against Embiid so much, whatever. And we all kind of try to convince ourselves of this or that reason for why something might get better. I'm on the same page as you on Monty. I think it was time, and I've said that a bunch. But I think there's also just the reality that, like, most of the time this stuff gets over the hump, so to speak, because the players get better, they gel better, they figure it out, they execute, they improve. Like, Michael Malone, I don't think of as, like, the best coach in the NBA, but he's been there for 8 years. I'm sure Nuggets fans probably feel like he's gotten better at certain things and that he's earned their respect and trust, and they think he's the right guy for the job. But, like, that team's a champion potentially because all those guys are really good and they figured it out together. Like, I think that's really what it comes down to. So how much do you feel like changing out all the other stuff really affects things at the end of the day?
I think coaching-wise, like, it happens all the time where you kind of just lose the ear. Like Harbaugh, he went to the NFC Championship 4 years in a row, and turned a laughing stock into a respectable franchise again.
True.
And he just kind of wore out his welcome. And I think that's a thing that happens with players and coaches. Even though all the players that play for Harbaugh love him still, I just think at the end of the day, sometimes you do just need another voice, because sometimes it does fall on deaf ears after you've heard those Monty-isms enough times. And I think just everybody had just kind of just wore it out. And it wasn't a bad thing. It's just something that happens in sports. Nobody has the same teacher 6 years in a row. And I'm sure if you do have that, you're kind of going to get annoyed at some point. If you're going to school every day and hearing the same voice for 6-7 years, that's just how it works.
Yeah, Cade Cunningham, big family guy, already has a kid, I believe, went to college based on where his family was ingrained already, and seems like a good fit for Monty. I think it's probably the best the Pistons are going to do. I mean, I don't know a lot about different assistants and whatnot around the NBA, but the guys who are the finalists for their job, I mean, one of them was coaching high schoolers at Overtime last year. The other one's an assistant for the Pelicans, who I know went through the Warriors staff and whatnot too. And then Charles Lee with the Bucks, who I think he's the guy that's going to get it if Monty doesn't take it. He seems like a decent candidate, but I would trust Monty over all the guys that were considering them, especially if they're actually willing to pay to go get Monty and kind of convince him to come. But we'll see. We'll see what the Suns do. We'll see how he fares down there, and obviously, it's not going to be over. We're going to get to see what it all plays out as next year. But let's take your questions next. We have some random negativity in here in a few different spots. We have Aaron dipping back into the all caps writer idea with what the best NBA plotline of the season was, and more. We'll do that after a word from FanDuel. Make a fast break to FanDuel during the NBA playoffs. Right now, new customers can get a no-sweat first bet up to $2,500. They've more than doubled it. That's $2,500 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. They have obviously tons around the NBA Finals right now. Last I checked, the Nuggets were 9-point favorites. I would not be surprised if it's even more now. Nope, it's still hanging out at 9. They are they're minus 405 on the money line. The over-under is 219.5. I kind of like the over there as long as the Heat aren't too tired, and this one can get up. They have props, a ton of stuff. They have WNBA odds for every single game night over in the women's side. Tons. And, of course, beyond basketball as well. There's no better place to bet all the playoff action, though, than America's #1 sportsbook. That's FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get a no-sweat first bet. Up to $2,500. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Okay, let's get into some questions here. Thank you to everybody who responded on Twitter. That's at LockedOnPHXSuns to get in on future mailbags. This one is I just kind of disagree with the premise, but it's at John Yeehaw at Yeezy on Twitter. He says, "Who is the second most hated basketball player in Arizona, and why is it DeAndre Ayton?" There's a lot of basketball players in the world, so I'm not even sure you or I would have number 1 or number 2 in the same spot, and definitely not the same spot as the question had it, but I'm not even sure Luka's number 1. Who's the most hated basketball player in Arizona in your eyes?
Robert Horry.
Robert Horry's a good one. The guy who does Locked On Kings for us, Robert Horry beat the Kings in 4 playoff series, including the last time they ever made the playoffs in 2006, but also obviously 2002, which was a heated one with the Lakers that everybody remembers, and the 2 years before that. He brought Robert Horry on for an interview this week on Locked On Kings. I'm like, that's just complete trolling. I wouldn't dare do the same thing, and the Suns only had one real run-in with him. Yeah, that's a good one. I think Giannis has to be up there. I mean, I got bullied into changing the setup of my room because of how hated Giannis is.
I don't think Giannis was hated though. He just went otherworldly. I think Luka would be higher. It was just more contentious. It was just spicy.
He's more hateable, period. Regardless of if you're a Suns fan, Luka is significantly more hateable than Giannis.
Yeah. I think Giannis did it in such a way that we were devastated, but I think we were just like, hey, 40, 50 in a closeout game with 5 blocks. What are you going to do? Like, I think it was just kind of one of those kind of things where we just kind of tipped our hat to him. But I don't think it was hate, though. It was just he got us kind of thing.
I have a few other candidates, and we can talk about Ayton. I think Patrick Beverley from recent playoff battles.
That's a good one.
Landry Shamet, with all due respect. Feel like
I don't think he would be higher than Ayton. Like the Ayton thing, I wouldn't even call it hate. Let's just do this now. I wouldn't even call the Ayton thing hate. We've just always wanted so much better for him, and he's shown us so many times that he could do certain things, and then he refuses to do them. And that's our beef with him. I wouldn't say it's hate. It's just
like disappointment.
Yeah, it's like your parents like being mad at like a C. Like it's just like you've gotten an A like you'll give us an A every couple of years, but then you'll just come with a D every once in a while. Like that's what it is with him. It's just he showed us so many like enough A's where whenever there's like a couple D's in a row, we're just like, get him out of here.
I think one of the other things with Ayton too, and maybe it's just me, but people who have lived here for long enough and followed the Suns all the way back to, 2017-18 when he was at U of A, and even, knowing his history, I doubt anyone was like watching high school hoops back then, but even knowing that he was around here for high school, it's even more of like that. Like we thought you were going to become this and now you didn't. And it happened to be, if you live here and like the Suns, not only did you not fulfill those expectations, but you did it in such a like painful way for like my personal fandom, right? And I think that's where a lot of Suns fans come at it with. It's like, it'd be one thing at a level of disappointment if it was just like, oh yeah, that guy who went to Arizona just like didn't ever live up to it, Stanley Johnson or whatever. It's different when it's like, damn, and he did it that way on the Suns, and now we got to trade him. Ron Artest, where's he?
That buzzer beater, like, yeah, it sucked, but that team was, well, I wouldn't say better. It was just, you can say a lot of Lakers, though, like, just randomly, and you'll be, like, kind of right. So, yeah, like, Ron Artest, I just never really thought about it. It was an air ball, and he put it back. Like, I don't know how you can hate somebody over that. It was a really ridiculous play.
One that a lot of people have been trying to re-energize themselves about, get all riled up all over again, even though I don't know how many people even, like, think about this or even cared until Doc Rivers' name came up with the coaching stuff is him with the fight way back when.
With the Knicks, yeah.
Look, like if you go through all the people who fought each other in the 70s, 80s, and 90s in the NBA, then like you're bound to hate just about every other team and every other player because that was just all the time. There's any number of those, especially if the Knicks are involved.
Yeah, I mean, like who else could? I mean, we could. Sarver, like it's not a player, but I think he'd be pretty high on the list. Like we lost Amari, and none of our players want to ever come back. So I think that's kind of a pretty hateable person too.
All right. Another negative one is from Donnie Druin, who runs the Sports Illustrated Suns page and Cardinals page. He said, everybody talks about what moves the Suns can make to put themselves over the championship hump, but what's a move that could dramatically set the team back? I'm not really sure why he's trying to spend time thinking about how the team could get worse. It's a little weird. I mean, Donnie might not have grown up a Suns fan. I think he moved here to take all this over. I think he's from Pennsylvania somewhere. I think he's a Steelers fan. But what, like, realistically, not like, oh, trade Devin Booker for, whatever, but like, what are you most nervous about happening this offseason that would make you feel worse than you do right now heading into next year?
I think not nailing the next point guard could really screw us up for like the long run. I think finally, because Chris Paul, like he's always going to be able to do Chris Paul stuff every once in a while. I think he can still get us 44, 45 wins next year if he's a starter. But I think finally just getting out on Chris Paul and bringing in somebody else, and finally, like having our fast point guard that pushes the pace and that not working out, then that might mess everything up. And that could be like really devastating to the team.
There needs to be a name for like the Mendoza line, or like I know Matthew Berry had it with fantasy baseball with like the Wandy Rodriguez line and stuff way back when. That is like the exact level of point guard that you need to have with a Devin Booker and Kevin Durant team to feel like you can win a championship. And I don't know who it is, because obviously it's all kind of contingent on different types of things, but it's somewhere between what Chris Paul was 2 years ago, which I don't think you need a guy that good with Durant here, and where Payne is now. You need somebody better than that, but not quite as good as where Chris Paul was when he was an all-star 2 years ago. It's like it's between those two, but I don't know if it's Fred VanVleet good, if it's Mike Conley, if
I'm not even that
somebody like that.
Last night I was just having a conversation. Markelle Fultz.
I thought about that too. I don't remember if it was like a DeAndre Ayton thing, but I don't really think the Magic want Ayton. There's not an easy way to do it, but that's perfect because they have a lot of everything in Orlando. Like I'd be calling them and just being like, "Hey, anything you want to give us?"
How about this? Yeah, I think a dude that pushes the pace, big body, gets to the line. Like we just haven't had that. I think that it was like the perfect point guard. And yeah, I talked about it with my boy Ross yesterday, just about Markelle Fultz in the point guard situation. He was like, I had to think about that. Now I'm going to be thinking about it all the time. So yeah, I think
at least as an option, right? It's like maybe at a certain point he's not the shooter you need, but at that point, like okay, maybe Book is more there, or maybe Fultz is good enough where he just ends up being this guy who can kind of set you up and get off the ball and just make it work. Like his talent is good enough that I'm going to bet on it. I feel like he can play in the playoffs and he's a good defender. So
yeah, and
maybe
I think
it's like maybe that's the midpoint.
Yeah, I think a lot of people and potentially like swinging on somebody, because I think the Bulls are going to be out on ball soon. And I think just taking a chance on something like that and it not working out, that could be devastating to you. Like you can be like, oh, is me really good? You want to see? Like we can. Like
I think the stuff about him.
Yeah, week? I think if somebody just took the swing on it, because the Bulls really do seem like they're out. But if it works out, like you got ball with a team that runs and he's a really good defender and all that. But if it doesn't, you have a dude that doesn't play and you're playing campaign again for a whole season. Like I think that something like that happening could really set you back.
Yeah, I think that's a good answer. Yeah, I think that they'll be smart enough with Ayton where if I'm imagining out like the worst case scenario, I just honestly think like if it got worrisome enough as to their options on the market, they would just keep him. And that's not that bad of an outcome, all things considered, because you could trade him at the deadline, you could trade him next summer. Maybe he just ends up being better under Kevin Young or whoever ends up being the coach here. Like that, it's not quite as dire, whereas like the clock is just ticking on Chris Paul and he makes so much money that keeping him, you might end up with a year that he just gets hurt for the whole season. And then you're really messed up because you don't have a good way of replacing him. So yeah, that's probably the number one. I would put personally, I would put the Kyrie Irving pursuit up there just because whatever the flight risk might be of whoever gets Kyrie on their team at any point is always a question of if he's going to stay. That's whatever. I have no way of guessing on any of that, how much he
You were out from the start there.
But it's like basketball wise, it's just, why would you try to replicate what already didn't get you over the finish line with the Brooklyn Nets? That seems silly, have two players. I guess you would have Book, but okay, like they had Harden. It didn't work. So why do that, replicate that? Let's get a little bit more loose and fun here to close out the show. Talk about Aaron's favorite NBA plot lines from the season and what he would recreate on the formerly incredible all-time NBA internet show, All Caps NBA. We'll do that after one more quick break. All right, and we're back. My phone rang. Closing out here on what the best NBA plot line is of the season that made Aaron wish that All Caps NBA still existed and that he could have some fun with, spoof, and make fun of. Do you have an answer? I've teased it enough times. You've seen it sitting there.
I have such an obvious answer. And the fact that I get to be a homer at the same time, it's the Kanye West tweet. That would have just been so fun. It would have been the best episode we did. Like, it was so out of nowhere. I just remember that night like it was yesterday. It was like the most fun everybody had during the season. I think the Kanye West tweet about Chris Paul would have just been hilarious. Like, it would have been the best week of work.
Chris Paul is lucky as far as the timing of where we all were with Kanye at that particular point in time. I don't believe it, and obviously I think there's been some stuff that since then that just made it all pretty ridiculous. But if Kanye was like 15% more reliable and trustworthy at that point in time, I think that it would have gotten taken a lot more seriously, whereas I think mostly it was just jokes that night. Yeah, I remember where I was with that too. I was at my parents' house helping them out while they were out of town with something, and it was late, and I was just like, what? Literally, what is going on? Like, it was one of those things where I got onto Twitter like half an hour maybe after everybody had already been, firing off whatever their jokes and thoughts might have been, and I had to kind of do that backtracking of like, what's the original thing here, and what's just jokes about what happened versus the thing that I need to know that actually happened. And yeah, that one. Would you guys have just gotten tired of Kyrie after a certain point? Because that's the obvious other one. But like, how many shows and jokes and whatever can you really try to do with it? Just became like parody at a certain point this year.
Yeah, I mean, we did it our last season, and even then we were like, oh, another week of this. Like, he's still not playing. Like, I think that was kind of the annoying part. Like, we had already done everything we could, and then he posted the link to the video, and it was just been like, all right, here we go again. It would have just been too much. I think we would have tried our best not to talk about it that much.
I came across a TikTok page that is like, I don't know why they think they know it. The algorithm knows I like basketball. They know that I like the NBA, but I don't know how this particular thing popped up for me. But it was like a compilation, like edit page of people who had screen recorded IG lives that Kyrie had been doing. And it's just like all of his like inspirational stuff where he's like holding incense. And it just was like one after the next of like, wake up and embrace who you are. And then it would just cut. And it's like, why is a person who I don't understand. Yeah, there's only so much really there for you. All right. Last one here from Sunderous Dunks, longtime listener. Shout out to you, sir. He said, how much popcorn have you gone through watching Jock and Mikhail on Twitter, and how happy are you that we have Jock filling that entertainment void? I wouldn't personally describe watching Jock Landale tweet as like entertainment, but I think it's a good way to check in with whatever is going on with him on the internet, period. Did he just get really like cocky after he matched up with Jokic pretty well? I mean, he might be a free agent trying to get his name out there. What's the angle here that Jock is pulling? Because he's very ballsy on Twitter.com.
I've played football with people from there, and that's just kind of how they are. They're pretty brash, and they kind of just say whatever they want to say. It's just a thing with Australian people. So I think like that's kind of just what it is. He's just really Australian. Like every dude I've met from there is kind of like him. So
that's how Aaron Baines was as well. So I think you're onto something. Like, we would be talking to him in the locker room, and that season when he was here, it was like the upstart year with Monty and everything, but there were a lot of bad times, especially early on. And all of a sudden he would take forever to get ready. He's huge, so whatever. We all just kind of a little bit intimidating, waiting for him to talk, but he was one of the vets on the team, so you kind of wanted to get his perspective on things. And then we'd walk up to him, and then a couple answers, whatever, and then it's like, what do you guys have to do to get it together, this and that? And then it'll just be like 3 straight F-bombs out of nowhere in a sentence. It's like 11 at night. Everybody's gone from the locker room. It was like a 4-point loss. And it's just like, well, here's what I think. And then it would be something along those lines. So, yeah, I think you're probably right. That's just the tone. But it's just funny to me that he was never on social media, and then he just came out swinging like that.
Yeah, I think like we have a pretty big social media team. Like there's some teams where like nobody's really on it. But I think as far as like the sheer numbers, I think we have a lot of dudes that are online. So maybe he was just out of like feeling left out, just seeing everybody, even dudes that were traded, still talk to each other on there. So it makes sense that he finally got on. Going on like after like not like beating Joker, but just kind of hanging on for a little bit. I think he just felt confident enough to handle all the trash talk he was going to get and still kind of give it there.
I think that I blame the PHNX guys. I think that they just bullied him into, getting in on the nastiness on Twitter and forcing him to be a real media guy, which means that you have to say things you regret on Twitter. It was kind of cool though, that clip that he had that that Nuggets fans put some like game clips to of him describing the couple plays when Jokic just like blew his mind. Healthy respect is fine. I think Jokic is kind of maybe to come full circle with our Q&A here, similar to Giannis for Suns. Like, I don't think anybody came away from that Nuggets series feeling like hatred toward Jokic. It was just like, what just happened here? Like, we're just, in the wake.
Sometimes the guy's just torching you, and he's not like trash talking or anything. And I think that's kind of what makes it hard. Like, we hated Tim Duncan, but it was like mostly just kind of because it was Tim Duncan. Like, he didn't really do anything. He was just being Tim Duncan out there.
Yeah, the three is like the one moment you can point to, the game-winning three that he hit that one year. But even then, it's not like he came out and like punched Steve Nash in the face after that. He just did it, and then he went to the locker room, and then you just like felt very upset that he stole your soul as a Suns fan. But there wasn't really much to it. Jokic is very much in that mold. All right, that'll wrap us up. Thanks for all the questions. Locked on PHX Suns on Twitter, at BrennanClean14 if you want to follow me as well to get the next opportunity. We'll probably do those more frequently throughout the offseason as we're waiting for news to come in, especially after free agency when there's just about nothing to talk about. So hit follow or subscribe, get this show in your feed, follow along there. Catch Locked On Sports today, get caught up on everything going on around the whole world of sports as well, and I'll catch you guys one more time tomorrow to close out the week.